3, 2, 1. Everybody, 2, 1. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, the Rainforest Alliance's Thrive Together webinar series. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, the Rainforest Alliance's Thrive Together webinar series. 3. This is part of our Follow the Fog series and part of our Climate Week New York City collaboration with the Climate Group. And we'd really like to thank the Climate Group for their support of this webinar, which is called Climate Justice and Resilience, Farmers and Communities on the Front Lines. Just a few housekeeping notes before I turn it over to our moderator. We have more than 350 people registered for today's webinar, so it's a very large group. So we will be keeping you muted throughout the webinar. So do feel free to use the question and answer box, which you will find on your dashboard. We will be having some audience questions at the end, and this is a 75-minute webinar. So we will be going until 15 minutes past the hour in your time zone. I hope many of you will be able to stay for the full discussion and question and answers at the end. We also have people joining us on YouTube on our live stream, so welcome all of you. You can also send in questions through the YouTube chat box, and they will be relayed to us here in the back end of the Zoom. And one more note, and that is that your volume for today's webinar is controlled actually through your own computers or phones. So if you're not hearing us as loudly as you would like, or we're too loud, adjust your volume on your own computers. And now I would love to introduce our moderator. Her name is Nina Haas. She is the Engagement and Growth Coordinator for the Global Landscapes Forum and is also a member of the Board of Directors of the Rainforest Alliance. Welcome, Nina, and over to you.
Thank you, Lara. Hello and welcome, everybody. This year alone, there have been more than 40 reports from the United Nations on climate change and its impact. Earlier this month, WWF Living Planet report documented the drastic and rapid decline of biodiversity. It is clear that the time to act is now if we want to harness our best solutions. I'll be speaking today with environmental and indigenous activist Hindu Umaru Ibrahim, with the chairman of the Sefi Akotomba Landscape Management Board and cocoa farmer Sylvester Menza, Elijah Owusu, chairman of the Jubusu Bihu Landscape Management Board and also a cocoa farmer, Saeed Abdul Razak, the lead for climate change at the Rainforest Alliance, and Angela Teja Jarves, senior manager of strategic sourcing for cocoa at Mars Wrigley. We'll be speaking about solutions and ways forward collectively, and also particularly for corporates, many of which have joined us online today. Firstly, it's my honor and pleasure to speak with Hindu Umaru Ibrahim. Hello, Hindu.
Hi, Nina.
So good to speak with you. Let me give you a bit more background on Hindu. We're really fortunate that she has been able to join us today. For those who might not know her so well yet, Hindu has been an environmental and indigenous activist since you turned 16. You're a member of the Chad's Pastoralis Momboro community, UN SDG advocate and president of the Association for Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad. Your work has been really recognized by many awards and mentions. You've been named one of BBC's top 100 women leaders and Times Women Leaders in Climate Change, and you have a fantastic TED Talk that I think more than 1 million people have seen. Welcome, Hindu. I don't think we have to talk about reports when we talk about climate change. You and your community have been witnessing and feeling the impacts of climate change for many years now. Would you like to take us there and maybe share some of the realities of climate and climate impacts that your community and maybe Indigenous and local communities more generally are facing?
Right, Nina, as you said, when we talk about climate change, maybe some people are reading it in the reports, or maybe they are watching just some extreme event in the TVs or hearing in the radios. But for my peoples and for many other Indigenous people around the world, we are living the climate change impact in our daily life. And that's the one I will share with you. I am coming from a nomadic pastoralist communities around the Sahel regions. And then when we talk about the Sahel regions, maybe we think it's dry, but it's have a various ecosystem with a incredible livelihood and with the incredibles worldwide who are there. When we talk about the elephants, lions, and the extremely exotic birds, they are in our lands. But all that lives are become very vulnerable by the climate change. And especially for the peoples who are living and depending from the nature. And we have more than 80% of the world, of the population of this region depend only from the rainfall. My community, it's part of it. We do not depend from the end of the month salaries. We do not depend from the supermarket where we buy our foods. We depend from the rainfall, from the lands, from the resources that's surrounding us, from the lake and fresh water. So for us, we are seeing our season change a lot. And right now, where I talk to you, there are extremely floods in all the regions, coming from the everywhere and flooding all the towns and the rural areas. When you just to go to the social media, you can see it. From the Niamey town to N'Djamena town to Khartoum. And even in Uganda, also I heard it just this morning. So flood everywhere and people died. Thousands of them died just because of the flood. We cannot talk about the homeless or about the food insecurity that follow on it. And only 4 months ago, the drought, it's more than 50 degrees Celsius. So for us, this extreme weather just come with the climate change impact because we do not create it. So this is also the part of the injustice that our peoples are living in the daily basis. It's create conflict among the communities that fighting to get access to the shrinking resources. And in the top of it, we have COVID-19, who come and increase the existing environmental crisis that we are living. It is the case of many other indigenous communities, and I'm thinking especially about my brothers and sisters in Amazon, where they have more than 20,000 dead just because of COVID. And continuously the illegal mining and then deforestations are in our land. So it's really so unjust that the people who create the climate change are still benefiting in our back, and we are the one who are the front line of the climate change impact. And we are also suddenly the one who are protect this environment better in our traditional way.
Thank you, Hindu, for sharing what's going on right now in your communities. Can you share a little bit more about I think you mentioned about Indigenous people capacity to address some of the impacts. Can you take us there and talk a little bit about the incredible knowledge that there is as well?
Right. So as Indigenous peoples and those who are coming from the desert or from the mountain, from the savannas or tropical forests or glaciers, we all live and depend from the nature. And this way of life of centuries allowed us to develop an incredible ecological traditional knowledge. And that helped us to be resilient and live in harmony with this nature. And I take you to the example of my peoples where I grew up. So for us, there are not even electricity. So you cannot talk about radio or TV or internet that can give us the informations, the basic one on the weather. Because of course, people in the cities where they want to see the meteorology, it's to see the coat dress that they have to take if it's going to be rainy or cold or hot. But the people in the rural areas, the extreme information that we wanted to have about the weather, it's to plan the crops or to plan the movement of the transhumans. But we do not have this one. So we develop our own meteorological informations by observing the nature. So we know exactly that from all the plants or herb or flowers or insect, they do not talk or articulate any wording that we can understand, but they also react to each climate that's come. So we learn by observing and understanding how they are reacting, from the animal behaviors to the flowers that can produce, or from the wind direction, or from the cloud positions, or just to the little insect movement. So we just understand them, and by observing them, we know if one season is coming or another one is ending. And that's helped us to plan our movement, leaving one place to another one. So those kind of knowledge, they are so important, and we cannot learn them sitting at the school, university, or college. We can only learn them when we are in relationship with this nature. And it is the same in the forest. When you go to the tropical forest, the indigenous people land are the most diverse ecosystem, better than a national park, because we know how to keep the balance between all the species of the nature. And it is the same when you go to my brothers and sisters in the Pacific or Caribbeans. They know how to navigate during night and day inside this huge water of oceans. And they know also after the hurricanes when to find a fresh water or food for them communities without waiting for the food aids that can come maybe later. So in Arctic, it is the same, because I have my brothers and sisters there, the Sami peoples, those who are a pastoralists also with the rangers. So they know where to dig during a big winter to find a grass for them rangers. And those knowledges, it is not like school knowledges. We develop them because we live in harmony with our nature. So we have a lot to give on restorations of biodiversity, of protection of climate change, but we are not giving the right place to make the decisions on those kinds of, of leadership who is not including the indigenous peoples.
And yeah, and about 1/4 of the world's forests are actually managed by indigenous or local people. And we know, of course, of the importance of forests and trees with regards to climate change. So what is your ask, or what is your suggestion? How can we change that and include indigenous people and their knowledge in a better way in this collective fight against climate change?
So I think we have many ways to do it, and in different level. It is not only like including indigenous peoples, or like in a panel we say, oh, we have only man, let us have one woman to be there. And then we can say, let us have indigenous person to be there, and that's it. So we don't want to have the show up of good mind there. We wanted to have a proper partnership, even with the governments, with the big organizations, UNs, or foundations, the companies that are taking the decision on our lands. So we wanted to be a decision makers. We wanted to be a partners to sit in the tables, because we have a lot to bring there. And we are also the most impacted. So at the local level, there is urgent needs of listening indigenous peoples, respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples and recognizing the land right of Indigenous peoples with the free, prior, and informed consent. At the national level, all the legislations, many countries are so happy, like they ratify the Paris agreements all. Are they implemented at the national level? I'm not sure about the legislation that applying at the national level. They must change that. They must recognize Indigenous people's knowledge are part of the solutions, and they must include Indigenous peoples into the planning of each of the plan that they are having on climate change. The international level, we get luckily the recognition in the Paris agreements. IPCC also said Indigenous people's knowledge are very crucial, but we don't want to have only our knowledge that to get recognized. If our rights are not respected, our knowledge will be also disappears with our rights and with us. So there is urgent need of our free, prior, and informed consent, respecting our knowledge by having the policies and the safeguard that can make us to sit in the tables and make the decisions. And especially to all the private sector, because those are the worst one who go and steal our land and who continuously, even during this COVID pandemic, going to the land and logging. I don't know if you hear about this last report, just to publish it 2 days ago from Oxfam on inequality. The 10% of the rich peoples become more 20% rich in the back of the poor, just because they are using us. So they are continuously using the crisis to just to make themselves rich and rich again. So the private sector must invest on a nature-based solutions. And when we say nature-based solution, it is not putting the price in our nature. It is just integrating the way of life of Indigenous peoples. Those are the nature-based solutions, or what I explained to you, how we are living in Harmony. So making the decision by respecting the planet and the peoples who are living there. There is no sustainable business without sustainable peoples there. And there is no inequality without inclusion of all the communities, and especially the Indigenous peoples who are suffer the most, who become vulnerable just by another people's action in our land. We used to be the most powerful, and we are just becoming most vulnerable because of them action in our land who is very negative.
Thank you, Hindu. We're now going to move on for this very clear and very passionate statement for Indigenous rights. And I note very powerfully how you said we cannot just accept Indigenous knowledge, but also the Indigenous rights, because otherwise the knowledge will disappear with us. So we're going to move now to Ghana and to cocoa farmers who are also at the front line of climate change. But Hindu, you will stay with us. And I look forward to coming back to our collective conversation later on. Thank you. So it's my pleasure to introduce Sylvester Menza, the chairman of the Sevi Akotombra Bodi Landscape Management Board, representing more than 3,000 farmers. Mr. Menza, you're also a cocoa farmer, as well as Elijah Owusu from the Jubusu, thank you for helping me out. BU Landscape Management Board, and you're representing 2,500 cocoa farmers, and you're also a cocoa farmer yourself, of course. We're joined by Said Abdul Razak, who is the lead for climate change at the Rainforest Alliance. And other than me, you're all in Ghana. Welcome. I'd like to particularly thank Sylvester and Elijah, because even though we're all meeting online here, you actually had to travel to meet with us. And I understand you left your home last night to be in a place where you can speak with us today and share your view for better climate justice. So thank you so much for taking all this trouble onto you.
Thank you too.
So in the landscapes you're from, cocoa farmers have come together to transform the entire landscape, which is a couple of million hectares. And by establishing the landscape management boards of which you're the directors, and the landscape management boards, they oversee the planning, implementation, and monitoring of sustainable practices on cocoa farms, and the impacts of the work you've done are nothing short of remarkable. Would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
Right. As we are going to speak together, or are we going to share our time? Okay. Let me first give thanks to the Almighty God who has brought us far, and also give thanks to the array who has organized such an important meeting. Let me start from initially how we do our farming. We clear the weeds, and we bend and plant our crops and our cocoa. So is how we were doing our farming at the initial stage, till the Rainforest Alliance came to give us a new idea to clear the land and to plant our trees, to plant under the trees. So comparing the two, I will say that planting under the trees has helped us a lot. And also planting the trees in our cocoa farms also has helped us a lot. Because at first when the sun shines, the sun shines on our cocoa direct. So could you imagine some of our cocoa trees has even died because of the sunshine? But as we are planting the trees on our cocoa farm in order to give us shade on the farms, it has helped us a lot. And with the two, I can say that planting trees in cocoa farm is the best. Not giving the cocoa a shade alone, but it has increased our yield. And you know, increasing the yield also, that means it is going to give you something in your pocket. So it has helped us a lot. By so doing, we have taken it on our shoulder also to teach our neighbors, not only by words, but coming to see in our farms, to see the difference. So in fact, the Rainforest Alliance, in partnership with the OLAM, as all along has helped us a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for giving us such opportunities, as already said by Mr. Elijah. As he has already said, comparing formerly to nowadays, the climate change has come to stay, and it is causing us a lot of harm. It is causing our farms, even our cocoas are dying. But through the intervention of OLAM, which has helped us a lot, giving us the education to help our farmers to plant the trees, it has helped us a lot. And we are still creating awareness, expanding it to nearby communities so that it can help them also know how the climate change is causing harm to our farms. And even our rivers are also dying up due to the sun coming directly and causing harm to the river bodies and the land itself. So a lot has been done, and more has to be done also.
And as we are continuing, planting the trees is not only our objective. Also, we are sharing with the farmers to have something benefits to add values to their what they have. Especially, there are so many implications that let farmers go to the forest. Something like going to have for army and chasing grass cutters. So we have taken that too on our shoulders to let the people rear grass cutters in order to get meat, and also training them to be in beekeeping. And with the beekeeping too, it has helped us a lot. So we have so many enterprises. For the beekeeping, we are having the certified ones, comparing to those in the forest that they go with fire to even to destroy all the bees. We are not on that line. So it means we are having a correct army, that we don't use fire even to temper the bees. And with that too, it has helped us a lot. And moreover too, we are taking to plant coconuts also to support our income. And that too, we started not quite a long, but those who have involved have seen that in future, it will generate funds to us. So there are so many things that we are doing, attach the tree plantings in order not for people to get interest, even to go to the forest to chase one or two things. That is what we are doing here in Ghana.
And also, in our awareness creation, we advise them and told them not to encroach, even weed into river bodies, so as to protect the rivers from sunshine, and also not to enter the forest, so that it can help, because many of the rivers takes their sources from the forest. And so we are also advising them not to go into the forest to degrade the forest, so that it will affect our water bodies.
And also, as we are continuing, first in Ghana, when a tree is in your farm, it does not belong to you. So by the teachings of the Rainforest Alliance in partnership with the Olamas, I'm saying, we are now planting over 80 to 100,000 tree seedlings that we have taught the farmers that it is going to be their bona fide property for them, whether alive or dead. So with that too, many have come to join us, knowing that if I plant a tree and the tree would belong to me, why not? So these two too, we know that in course of time, it is going to change the climate to its normal procedure, because if many are planting the trees, it means we are going to retreat the forest back. In our cocoa and fellow lands and degrade areas, we are doing our best in Ghana.
And coming to Akontomura Bodi and Sekioso landscapes, this year alone, we gave out about 60,000 seedlings to farmers to plant, so that it can protect their farm, as well as the climate change itself. It can protect it a little bit. So gradually, we are still going on to create and share more seedlings.
It's really, sorry.
You can go on, please.
I was just going to say that listening to you, it's really, it quite moves me to see the action, how you guys have taken things in your own hands and made changes. And it gives me a lot of hope to see that we can do things. Saeed, if I may ask, come in here, bring you into the conversation here. And this is so encouraging to hear what's been happening in these two landscapes. Diversification, climate smart agriculture, farmers taking responsibility for land beyond their own farms. How can we scale these climate smart agriculture approaches further, and what role do you see governments and private companies playing?
Thank you, Nina, and a good morning, afternoon, and evening to everybody joining us from different locations. As the Rainforest Alliance, we believe strongly that, yes, we need to scale up climate smart agriculture, scale up landscape restoration, and that this is a sustainability drive that needs to be like that. Once we deal with, you also tackle climate change. Now, we feel like it should not be the sole responsibility of the producer, but then it should be shared across the supply chain actors. In that way, you don't create an inequality, but then you strive towards moving to a more just system of dealing with the problem of climate change and not putting it on the shoulders of only the farmers. So I'm glad to say that in light of this, in our new standard, which was launched 2020 June, RA is helping move away from a model that places the burden on investing in sustainable production exclusively on producers to a new system. And we do this through what we call shared responsibility, which is a term that most people would have heard within the climate space if you work within it. So as part of scaling up CSC, we have also ensured that climate smart agriculture principles are well embedded in our new standard. And this is because basically climate smart agriculture, as Elijah and Sylvester have mentioned, help us to reorient agricultural production to the new realities that we are facing with respect to a changing climate, a variable climate. Therefore, to be able to scale this up, we require data and innovation. We require resources, finance especially. We require right policies. We require knowledge and the know-how. It also requires appropriate institutional arrangements, and it requires willingness for adoption. Now, this willingness for adoption spreads across all stakeholders. With all the things I have counted, it is clear that scaling up CSA will therefore have to be multi-stakeholder based. Everybody has a role to play. Just like Hindu mentioned, private sector, for instance, shouldn't therefore just focus on the profits they're going to make, but how they're going to contribute to make sure that we have a working system that is good for food systems. In terms of getting government, private sector, and then I know you didn't mention other actors, but NGOs, research, academia, I think they all have a role to play. And starting from government, there should be policies that are consistent, policies that increase coordination towards multi-stakeholder approach that favors cross-sectorial integration, and then a coherence for climate smart landscapes. We heard Elijah and Sylvester talk about the farm and then talk about the bigger picture of keeping forest, of keeping the ecosystem. And so it's important that we move from the farm gate to a landscape level. So then agencies involved in climate change and agriculture, development in food security, and other relevant sectors need to be brought together by governments within enabling environments. Also, I think that it's important that CSA is mainstreamed into core government policies and programs, including policy expenditures from the subnational level all the way to the national level is inclusive. Now, one of the key things, and based on, experience, is that education, awareness, and capacity building has to also be happening. In order to be able to build adaptive capacity of these farmers and farming communities so they can increase their resilience. Private sector and government can support things like farmer field schools, things like farmer-to-farmer exchanges. Again, we heard from our colleagues in the field, the cocoa farmers, talking about how you actually don't just talk, but then you demonstrate the change from your cocoa farm that you have practiced agroforestry from that of another person who is not practicing agroforestry or any climate smart agriculture technique. So Being able to facilitate these things, funding them, funding even bringing together the farmers just to have this knowledge exchanges is essential. And I know in most parts of the globe, you have extension officers, agric extension officers. These people take knowledge to, technical knowledge to the farmers. They need to become knowledgeable and be able to empower farmers on CSA, on climate smart agriculture. Now, a continued engagement and deliberation discussions between government and private sector is key on resilience. It's key to make sure that the understanding of climate smart agriculture is picked up. And I feel this will therefore attract investments into the sector. Now, another thing is that green loans and finance is picking up, but it's not as high in some developing countries like Ghana. And so obviously this works in most of the other developing countries. We need to be able to have favorable lending conditions, rates and periods for such loans for farmers so that they can upscale climate smart agriculture. And then research has a serious role to play here. So with research, you could also have data. With research, you could also know what impacts are going to happen in certain areas, projected changes, to therefore know what to expect, which areas will be suitable for cocoa, for coffee, for tea, for whichever commodity you are working on, and then which areas will be not. And then you could then take decisions and institute the right approaches. That said, I think that one of the key things in upscaling climate smart agriculture, and this is something that at RA we are currently taking forward and pushing a lot, is that it is essential to make sure that the climate smart agriculture techniques are context specific. The adaptation efforts or measures you come up with have to be in relation to the context, the crop, the climate, the area you are in, the ecosystem. So it is key that to do this, there is a risk vulnerability assessment that is done by farmers and at a landscape level. So where these do not exist in most of the places, especially in, I think, in Africa, you have to therefore be able to have farmers doing a risk and vulnerability assessment. And we therefore capture this also in our new standard. So farmers are able to know exactly what relates to them in terms of a variable or changing climate, what measures are available to them, and which measures will work. And then be able to monitor and know what is working and what is not working. Thank you.
Thank you, Saeed. So really, there is no one-fits-all solution, and everybody has a role to play. Thank you for laying this out. And this is not just for cocoa, this is across crops and supply chains. Let's move to Angela. Thank you very much, Sylvester, Elijah, and Saeed. I look forward to speaking more later.
Thank you.
Hello, Angela.
Hi, Nina.
You must be keen to come into this discussion, private sector having been highlighted so much already. But first, I'd like to introduce you briefly. We have the pleasure to have Angela Tejada Chavez with us, originally from Peru, speaking with us today from London, and in the role of Senior Manager of Strategic Sourcing for Cocoa for Mars Wrigley. You have been working for Mars for, I think, over 8 years now, and in different roles, cutting across cocoa and sustainability. I understand that I think in your family, you also have a cocoa farm, or you're also from a cocoa farming background, so it runs in your veins.
That's right.
From the discussions we've heard, let me just put you on the spot. From the discussions that we've heard so far, would you like to come in and maybe comment on some of the points that's been made so far, maybe by Hindu, maybe by Saeed or by Elijah?
Of course. Thank you so much, Nina, for having me, and everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to be with Hindu, Sylvester, Elijah, and Saeed. So thank you again. Indeed, I was born and raised in Peru, and I know about farming, albeit not cocoa farming specifically, but rather my grandfather was a vegetable farmer. And when I was growing up, I would spend many of my weekends going to the farm together with my grandfather. And I grew up just learning about how to take care of the land. And some things that Hindu mentioned in regards to knowledge about caring for the land and having some traditional knowledge or indigenous knowledge, I grew up with that from my grandfather. So when I grew up, he will take me to the farm, and he will do fantastic things such as looking at the moon cycle and deciding what is the best timing to plant. Or every time there will be a harvest, we had to do a ceremony to pay back to Mother Earth, or as we call it in Peru, Pachamama. And it's this kind, so in a way, I grew up thinking this is how everybody does farming. This is the normal, and that's what I thought. But fast forward some years and I learned that was not the way. And when I went on to do my environmental studies, I came to learn that what my grandfather and his colleagues were doing at that time is not what we call sustainable agriculture. All this care for the land, for the people, and ultimately they were doing it because they knew that was the right thing to do. And that was the way for their farm to be healthy and profitable in the long term. So indeed, that really helped me. And then when I later on found Mars, it was a very good match because I found a company that cares about the products that they buy and cares about the supply chains, where the products are coming from. So in that way, that was a good match because my goal is to make sustainability seamlessly integrated in how we do business. And that's what I've been doing for the past years.
How amazing to have somebody with your background in your position and in your role. This is great. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your role at Mars and in sustainability in general, and maybe also touch on the Cocoa and Generation Plan?
Absolutely. So maybe some of you, or maybe not, you may have heard, but Mars has a commitment across all of our businesses, not only from the chocolate or Mars Wrigley, but we also have commitments across our pet care and food businesses. So that's what we call our Sustainable in a Generation plan. And this plan is a very ambitious plan because we are really looking at all areas of the business, and we are working in things such as changing the plastic packaging into with more eco-friendly materials, but we are also looking at how to tackle challenges that have to do with food safety challenges. And at the same time, we are pushing ourselves very hard in rethinking in how do we buy our raw materials, and this constant drive and push to make a positive change for the people of the planet. And I can be one of the examples of that. I come from the sustainability background. I've been working in sustainability for over 10 years now. And over the past year, the business gave me the opportunity to go into sourcing. And that, I have to say, is very courageous from a business point of view, because that really shows the true intent of bringing these two worlds together, because we do believe that ultimately that's the only way that we will have a business in the long term. As it pertains to Cocoa for Generations, we building on decades of research and investment and just overall experience in cocoa. In 2018, we launched our Cocoa for Generations, which is essentially our plan where we outline how do we plan to work as Mars, but also with others to tackle these challenges. And we invite our partners to join us in this journey where we are looking at new approaches that protect children, improve farmer income, and preserve forests. So it's a holistic approach because, as our previous panelists have already shared, when addressing these sustainability challenges and climate change, you have to address it in a holistic and balanced way. It cannot be done just looking at one thing alone. So all in all, what we are doing in Cocoa for Generations is working to create a pathway to where cocoa farmers, their families and communities can thrive. And how we do it, we partner a lot with our suppliers, and we do this through our supply chain. And this is where sometimes maybe we don't talk enough about where we are behind. Our colleague Elijah may know, but Mars has been behind some of these partners supporting and providing investment for making this landscape project become a reality. And over the past year alone, in 2019, we distributed over 500,000 trees in Ivory Coast and Ghana alone, and over 1.1 million trees of cocoa trees. So that's just to show the scale into what we are doing. Albeit, like I said, you might not always know Mars is behind that.
Wonderful, thank you for sharing. So Mars is clearly doing a lot, but are we doing enough?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it goes, everybody knows this year has been very difficult for everyone, and for ones more than others. And having been on the sourcing side over the past months, I know by firsthand experience that many of us had to look at our supply chain because we had to ensure continuity of the business. And I also know that many senior leaders were surprised to know what was happening behind your own supply chain. So, and why is this important? For a couple of reasons. From a business point of view, your supply chain are only going to be as strong as the weakest link. And if there is no action taken, then essentially it's a direct impact into the business that you are running. Now, my encouragement for everyone is to use this educational moment and to use this and to turn all this energy and channel that to look at your supply chains and commit to improve them. For example, in our case, since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, what we decided to do, we made it a priority to protect farmers and the farming communities by trying to limit the farmers' potential exposure to the virus. Many of our programs had to come to a stop and they had to be repurposed. So instead of organizing trainings for the farmers, we were providing hygienic kits for people to be able to wash their hands and just do our part in there. We've also been working with our associates, our suppliers, their families, and again, like I said, just trying to contain and prevent the spread of the virus. And as we continue to monitor this, we will continue to do more, and we will continue to repurpose our supply chains to bring the help that is needed now. So all in all, I agree with you, is we are doing a lot as Mars, but the challenges that we are facing are too big to tackle for one company alone to tackle. We are all impatient for change. Everywhere I go, and everyone I talk to, everybody likes fast change and they want results tomorrow. So I wonder, rather than being impatient with each other, can we be impatient together and channel that energy to really drive the change that we need and use the technology that has advanced so much in the past years to bridge the gap of knowledge that we still face today. The way that we understand climate change in certain communities is very different how it's felt in the farming and the communities. I believe our job is to make information accessible so people can take action. So my call to action and my call to everybody is really take a critical look at your supply chain, learn from this COVID-19 pandemic, and then start just by knowing what is happening and committing to improve. And if you still have doubts, I would say, just check in with yourself, whether your 5-year-old self is going to be proud of you if you decide not to take action.
Thank you, Angela. And yes, the 5-year-old inside is often a good guide of what's the right thing to do. Can we have the whole panel back, please? Hello.
Hello.
So we have come full circle. And Angela has very eloquently outlined what your call to action to, I think, your colleagues in the private sector. Maybe we can move also to Sylvester and Elijah, and maybe to Hindu. From your perspectives, what would you see as the most crucial action companies and maybe governments can take to bring about climate justice and increase resilience in your communities? What would be your call to action, or what would you see as like the one thing to do?
Okay. I think the involvement of the private sector will also help us. And formerly, or in the olden days, there are areas termed as no-go area, which was always protected. And gradually, it becomes a forest. And it was difficult for people to enter because there were laws guarding such places. And the aim of setting aside that places are to help the environment. So I think if the private sector also comes in, I think this has with this situation now undermined, the Olam and the Rainforest Alliance has helped us created what should I call it? A restoration site whereby we are planting trees so that it will serve as a place of learning to our nearby communities. So whenever the private sector comes in and help us, we can expand it. And some years to come, it can become a tourist attraction center.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
As Sylvester is saying, teachings in the communities and also to the schools. Also, you know one thing, if a child knows the importance of a tree, it will go a long way. So as he is saying that we are having some sacred area where it is no-go area and all other things too. We wanted the private sectors to come in to help us in giving more education to communities and in schools, so that a child may know the importance of what a tree is, and also hello.
So if I understand you correctly, in a way that would go into the direction that Angela has also said about bridging the technological and maybe the knowledge gap.
Yes.
Yes, Hindu, please just unmute yourself and come in. It's your discussion.
Yeah, sure. I enjoy really listening from Sylvester, Elijah, Said, and Angela. Angela summarized it really very well. My sister always in this. So technology, it's very important. It is time of technology, of course, but we don't want to have the technology that in any cost also. That can be for solutions for our peoples. So I think the governments and the companies have the responsibility to respond to the needs of the communities that left behind for long. And one of the response is how they can share this kind of knowledge and technology that are relevant to some of critical activities that we are doing, not all. For example, we wanted to have the renewable energy in the communities, because energy can help to develop a lot of other activities, but not like the mega dams or mega energy that can destroy again the environment in the land, but the small scale that can be accessible for the communities, and that can help the communities without destroying the land that we do have. And government must recognize that communities, and especially indigenous peoples, have a big role to play in all the plan and program that they are designing. They cannot only design all the program and come and say, oh, we are there, we wanted to implement it. And most of the time, business also is the same. So they just to say, we wanted to help. Maybe it is in a good phase, but they design the solution before to come to the communities. So that cannot help us. We are not a beneficiaries. I'm keeping saying that since and now when we start all the webinars. We wanted to be a partners. We are not beneficiaries because we know what we want. We know better our environment. We know better our land territories and resources. And I hear well from my sister Angela and then the three brothers, who explained that how they are knowing better than trees, how they are knowing better the cocoa, how they can work closely with all them plantations. So it is the same for the indigenous people, maybe more, because we are developing the knowledge every day in our daily basis in our land. So we know better our territories and resources. So if we are not partners, we are not designing all the project, we are not taking the decisions, it's not sustainable. And we are now talking about the sustainability, and we don't have time. We have like 10 years or less than 10 years to achieve the Paris Agreement for 1.5 degree. But in some countries like mine, we are already in 1.5. So how we can accelerate this part of implementation? And for the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, it is the same, because we cannot talk about protecting forests and resources and doing a great business without achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, because health, water, gender, all these are interlinkages. So for me, putting the nature in the heart of each decision that we are taking is the most important part we can all have. The role for all of us, it's putting peoples and nature. So we really need that, and we have to move from talks, reports, to the action, concrete action to the rural areas, not only in the cities. So all those panels we are doing in this virtual way, I hope that it's not only going to be talk among ourselves, but it's going to be an action for those people who are left behind, who do not have access to the internet.
Thank you, Hindu. So really, we talked about the need to partner of all stakeholders to come together. And I think you gave some important points here on how we need to come together. We need to come together as equal. We need to have free, prior, and informed consent. We need to co-design the solutions. You talked about being partners versus being beneficiaries. There are no beneficiaries. We all need to be partners in this. And yeah, we have to stop talking and start to work on concrete actions now together. Thank you. Is anybody else wanting to come in on this discussion before we go to Lara and the audience and see if there's any questions there? No. Lara, would you have, how is the audience doing and what kind of questions are coming up there?
Yes, we have many questions. I have a first one, which is probably for Angela. It's, can regenerative agriculture be profitable for companies? And I might add to that, and maybe, is it profitable for farmers?
That's an excellent question. And for the ones that are not familiar with the term regenerative, my simple explanation, whenever my family asks me about it, I tell them it's about keeping the soil healthy for many, many, many decades from now. So it's not only about having your farm today or in the next year, it's about having your farm in 50, 100 years from now. And there are many other things behind, of course. Can it be profitable? I think it depends in the time, it depends in which timeline you are looking at. Is it going to be profitable in 3 months? Maybe not. But is it going to be profitable in a longer time span? And that's the kind of conversation that we need to have. And also bringing, and that's what I was trying to hint at the impatient level as well. Like, I know that there are green funds being interested in investing and making changes. And I know that they are interested in this regenerative agriculture. What they need to learn is that it is possible, it can be profitable, but it's the time horizon that you use. And for farmers, that's one of the questions that I keep asking myself, and is how can they manage the potential additional labor needs that a different farming system will require? And again, how can we work together to make that more efficient and to make it more attractive ultimately as well?
Great, thank you. I have another question here from our YouTube audience member, directed to Hindu, asking a very specific question about pollutants. Are you seeing pollution in the water and pollutants in your food? And is this also an additional issue, the environmental health issue that you see building up in your region and in the future of your people?
Thank you. This is really a very good questions, because when we talk about the climate change, maybe in developed world, they talk about the pollutions. Even like personally, when I come to the big city like Paris or New York, I have always my eyes that getting so red. And then they tell me, oh, that's fine because it is the pollutions. But there are another type of pollution in our lands. Many indigenous peoples, and I can talk about my peoples, the water pollutions. So normally when you dig like 1 to 2 meters, you get the water, then it is the clean water that you can drink. But now the rivers are polluted, the lakes are polluted, and even the food are polluted. And it's create for our communities a new disease that we do not know, because we never experience like in our communities the disease like how to say, the respiratory issues, because we do not have these respiratory issues. But now there are a lot of cases of asthma that we do not know why, because there are a lot of winds that coming with the particles that people do not understand at all. So the pollutions, it's really a big issue and a big matter. It is not only about the air, but it is about the pollution of our soil. And I think Angela also talked a little bit about it. If the soil is healthy, we are healthy, but the soil is not healthy, our crops cannot grow up the right way. Even if they grow up, you cannot get the right seeds for the next plantation or for your food to eat. And then it will give you a new disease. And this is only in my land, but it is the same. I saw that during this COVID in one of our indigenous communities in Amazon. So there was illegal mining in them lands, and the only one river that they have with the fresh water and the fish they are fishing. So it's got polluted, and then they found all the fish just dying outside in the rivers, just there. So they cannot lock down themselves, and they cannot get the food to eat, and they cannot go outside in the risk of COVID. And they found themselves just like in a jail of a mankind action.
Thank you, Hindu. I have another question here from a YouTube audience member. This is for Sylvester and Elijah. Sylvester and Elijah, what advice would you have for communities? I think this is a person in Latin America. For communities just starting to grow cocoa and wanting to do it in harmony with the forest. So I think they mean in an agroforestry way. I'm sorry, Sylvester and Elijah, did you hear my last question?
Do you have any advice for somebody who would like to grow cocoa maybe the way you're doing this now, in a regenerative, climate smart way, maybe using agroforestry approaches?
Looks like they're frozen.
Maybe, yeah.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, you are off from the light. We didn't hear you proper. So the question again. The question again, please.
Yes, do you have any advice for somebody who would like to grow cocoa in the way you're doing it, in a climate smart, sustainable way?
Yes, of course. I will advise him or her to plant the cocoa under trees, because the cocoa under trees is the best, and it will live longer than that of pulling all the trees from the land. So one of my best advice that I will give the farmer is to plant the cocoa in lines and at the same time under trees, so that the shade of the tree will cover the cocoa in order for the cocoa to live long.
And also, advice is the person should not use fire or burn the weeds. And he started planting it. But if there is no trees or seedlings,
You should find it.
you should find them for the first year and plant the trees. And the following year, started planting the cocoa seedlings.
So all that we are saying is that the best way is to plant the cocoa under a shady trees that will help give the leaves, even the leaves of the tree will give the land a nutrition that will even serve the cocoa, the cocoa to get more nutrients so that it will yield more.
Thank you. Thank you for some expert advice.
Okay, thank you. I have one more
Doing that
audience.
also, it will help you not to use more chemicals, because the nutrition of the leaves will serve the land so that it will yield more, in order not to use unauthorized chemicals on the cocoa.
Thank you, Elijah.
Thank you too.
The final question from the audience, this person writes, it seems to me that the biggest issue is the willingness of decision makers to think for the long term and decades in the future. I am not a decision maker. Do any of you have any advice on what those of us who are not decision makers can do to influence the decision makers in our organization?
I'm happy to start. My learning has been twofold. First of is sometimes people feel overwhelmed at the magnitude of the challenge. And what helps is breaking things down into tangible milestones that can be achieved before we reach the ultimate goal that we want to achieve. And if I will go back in time to 10 years ago when I started working in cocoa sustainability, that's exactly what I will do. Rather be cognizant that the results that we want to see are going to take 5, 7, 10 years, and be clear into what success in each year looks like. And that really helps bringing people on board. And the second point will be is purpose and why and context. I find that having lived, worked, and studied in many countries across the globe, we all like to have a purpose. So it's finding that, and that combination of making it tangible and having a purpose, and it makes the conversation much easier.
Yeah, just to jump to what Angela said, I think if you wanted the leadership to listen to you, or you wanted to also take part of the decisions, make your revolutions. Don't shut up. Talk. Hold them accountable, because they have to be accountable. They are. We have to claim the transparency, the accessibility, the informations. And how we can do that, we saw with the climate change, when they start not listening to the peoples, people go out. And thus how the youth make the revolutions. And now it's become like the Friday for Futures. And every young people is sticking out for the climate. They're saying that you do not have right to destroy my future. And even the intergenerational discussions at home, at the family levels, the children's holding even them parents accountable. We are watching some of the TV publicity where they say, why are you buying the bottle of water while you can just like take the water directly in the tap? Because you do not use the plastic, it's harming our nature. So if everyone and each, we become a responsibles, we ask the accountability for the transparency, and we play our role also as responsible, so we can take the decision and we can make them think sustainably. The leaders, especially the political leaders, if they think just in the long of them nose, because they wanted to see the next position by the way, which time they're going to vote for them. Now we know all the games of the democracy election or whatever, because the first 2 years they start implementing what they promise. The next years they just do whatever that they want, and if it's have like 1 year before the next election, they start again making the promise and starting doing the things. They are thinking only about themselves, about their power. So we have to tell them that if it is us who is voting for them, they have to respect what we are requesting for. They cannot take the decisions in our back in excluding us. So then we can be in the middle of all the discussions. Environment discussions, climate, forest, in all, it is not about one country or one person or one white person or black person or Asian or African. It is about the humanity. It is about the planet. That's why we all have our responsibility. And that's also, I'm very proud to say, Indigenous peoples already take the responsibility by acting with our knowledge. We never give up, because this is our survival. So never give up, all of you, just to stand up and we can take the decision together.
Thank you, Hindu,
if I can
for
chip
these
in quickly.
very passionate final words. We're at our time. Unfortunately, I would love to continue that discussion with you, and I can't help by feeling so inspired by every one of you who is in your own roles, in your own place, with your own responsibility, doing what it takes in this situation. And maybe coming back to this theme of shared responsibility. Shared responsibility means that every one of us holds a responsibility, no matter what our role is or what our sphere of influence is. And so maybe in closing, I could just suggest that we take back this discussion we just had and take 5 minutes afterwards for each of us to think about, what is it that I can do that goes beyond what I've done so far? And with that, I'd like to thank everyone. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Saeed. Thank you, Hindu. Thank you, Sylvester. And thank you, Elijah. And thank you, Lara, for this conversation. And I wish you all a good day, and I wish us all a great future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.